Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 50 plus ideas to turbocharge your leadership success. It's great to have you here. And before we dive into this explosion of leadership ideas to support your personal professional development, let me give you just a little bit of background context about where this came from. So I'm used to delivering extended programs and created sustained learning experience. And a couple of years ago, I was asked to roll up a 4-session program into one session for a larger group and deliver it during their professional development day. The goal was to stimulate dialogue and topics. So they asked me to do something that I was really uncomfortable with, which, by the way, is a good leadership lesson itself. I decided to take it on. No, I wasn't comfortable. And guess what? It actually worked. The disconnected, disparate ideas spawned a whole variety of great side discussions and breakouts on succeeding as a leader. So from the school, if you want one great idea or a couple of great ideas, you need to generate a lot. Here are 50 plus ideas on pursuing great leadership. And remember, it takes just the spark of one idea that you turn into action to make a difference for yourself, for your team, and for your organization. Welcome. If you're anything like me, what you're striving for as a leader is something that looks and feels a lot like what's in this slide, right? You have an incredible bunch of talented individuals. In this case, it's musicians in the images, all playing the right music at the right time with the right level of energy. Everything is just working flawlessly. Does that feel like most of your leadership days? Yeah, I suspect what it's really like, and I know because I've been there for more than 2 decades, is a bit like this bumpy, muddy, rocky road. So as much as we want to sound like the symphony and feel like the symphony and generate music, real incredible music, there's certainly always obstacles, and more often than we care to admit, we end up picking ourselves up out of the mud. Well, my commitment here is to offer up the ideas to help you spend more time creating some beautiful music and one whole heck of a lot of time navigating the rocks and the mud. We're at the starting line, so you ready? Take notes. By the way, you'll see in the middle of this session that I have an email address. If you want the slides and if you want my coaching questions, feel free to reach back to me. I'm happy to provide these, no qualms. But with no further ado, here we go. And I think a great place to start is this idea of studying great leaders. These individuals, and they might be people drawn from our personal lives, a great teacher that inspired us, someone that we worked for at the last company, could be a parent, could be a role model, could be a coach, wherever it comes from. I'd also encourage you to take a look at history. I write business books and a business blog, and you know where I get my best inspiration on leading and leadership? From incredible historical figures. Read biographies, read histories. Study what these individuals do that has such an incredibly powerful impact on people, and strive to find ways to incorporate at least their thinking, if not some of their approaches, into your own activities. And by the same token, as counterintuitive as it sounds, I want you to study lousy leaders. You know, unfortunately, all of us cross the paths of these characters from time to time. I certainly know that I had my fair share. And guess what? When I would observe their particularly odious and less than compelling behaviors, I would kind of make a mental note, lock them in that vault, and swear a blood oath that when it was my day, I would never do that again. So yeah, I know, even if you're dealing with one of these characters in today's world, what an incredible learning experience it can be. So frame that differently. I want you to do something that sounds so anachronistic, so dated in our digital world, and that is that I want you to keep a leadership journal. I wrote an article about this recently, the beginning of 2018, and I have to tell you, the ideas that you can use and apply that leadership journal, from jotting down notes on what worked or what didn't work in constructive feedback and coaching discussions, to planning to navigate an upcoming discussion, to actually making some notes on how you want to frame and start your day and what you succeeded with at the end of the day. There are so many great and powerful uses. It is the single best continuous improvement tool you can come across. And you know what? It doesn't have to be the old form analog. Make it digital if you want. I use Evernote as much as I use Moleskine notebooks, but keep a leadership journal, please. You'll be happy that you do. The most important question, the one that I don't think we ask ourselves enough, is what type of leader do I want to be? So stop, pause, think about that. Jot that down on your notes, ideally in the newly started leadership journal in front of you. What type of leader do you really want to be? And I'll offer some tools and suggestions in the upcoming content here to help you out with that. So, one of the first ones is ask and answer. Why do I want to leave? What is it that you're striving to accomplish in this role? You know, there are a lot easier ways to make a living, and it would certainly be easy if it weren't for the people. So what is it that you are really striving to accomplish? I want you to know that being a strong leader, and there's a lot of pressure in our workplaces to be that strong leader, doesn't preclude you from being a servant leader. I've known many servant leaders who have been incredibly successful, and not a single person who worked for them, around them, or with them would have viewed them as weak. The fact that somebody wants to lift others up on his or her shoulders and support them and help them go forward doesn't mean that they're weak leaders by any stretch. So they're not mutually exclusive. I love this question, going back to what is it that you're trying to achieve and what type of leader do you want to be? This brilliant question I learned from a young project manager who was dealing with a really difficult team, and she sat down with them on the day that she was named project manager, and she looked at them and said, look, at the end of our time working together, when we're successful, what will you say that I did? And she said it with such authenticity and such just genuine curiosity. And once the team got over, having never been asked that question before, they generated all sorts of incredible content that she incorporated into her leader's charter, which I'll talk about in a moment. So ask your team, at the end of our time working together, when we've been successful, what will you say that I did? Speaking of this leader's charter, and again, Angela's question is really kind of the prelude to that. This is effectively a document that you write to yourself with the input of others around you that describes what your priorities are as a leader, what type of leader you're working to be. I will submit that if you define this, if you ask Angela's question, if you think through this and then give it back to your team and say, this is the type of leader I'm aspiring to be, and hold me accountable to it, please, it will shave years off of your work developing as an effective leader. By the same token, everyone who's around you wants to understand what you stand for. So guess what? Define the values, the accountabilities. Accountability is such a powerful value. The ethics, how you're going to work together, how you're going to support people. Your charter plus your values equals crystal clear context for everybody. And what a great foundation to build on when you've given that type of context to people. So define and share your leader's values along with your leader's charter. I want you to know your 3 imperatives. Think about this every single day. You've got a responsibility to manage and lead your team. You've got an obligation to manage your network. And we don't think in the context of the network. And no, it's not that attending an upcoming networking event. This is about building relationships and creating a surplus of reciprocity debt across your organization. Reciprocity is one of the most powerful influence tools. And the moral to that story is do things for others and help others succeed. And guess what? They'll owe you at some point in return. So how hard are you working not only at building relationships, repairing relationships where necessary, but creating a reciprocity surplus? And then this last one, manage yourself. Now that's an interesting thought. Guess what? I want you to spend most of your time managing yourself. Quit coming in trying to improve everyone else around you. Work on yourself. How well are you living up to this leader's charter? How well are you living up to Angela's question? This is a daily pursuit. Quit improving everyone else and start working on yourself. I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to work with a number of different groups that were responsible for leading in some incredibly challenging circumstances. People who put themselves in harm's way. Our police, our firefighters, our military, all of the folks in the armed forces have an incredibly difficult job. And I can tell you that the two attributes that come out as being the most important over and over again are, one, do people assess you as competent at your work? And number two, and more importantly, do people perceive that you care about them? So ask yourself, do you truly exhibit those behaviors that let those people around you know how much you care about them, not just as resources, as cogs in the machine, but as human beings? Competence and caring are incredibly critical attributes in leading. Trust truly is the basis of everything in terms of achieving high performance, helping individuals achieve their potential, and frankly, it's the critical component that you need to establish between yourselves and everyone around you in terms of why is it that they should actually trust you. It's the basis for your success. So you have to ask yourself a question: why will people trust me? Do they really trust me? If you can't answer that confidently, you definitely have an issue. You won't achieve high performance. So trust is fundamental to everything. And you know what? I want you to think about changing the way you cultivate trust with those people who work for you. Typically, we require individuals to earn our trust, right? I call it the walk on the hot coals. Instead, I want you to flip that around and give your trust. It feels risky. It feels dangerous. It leaves you exposed. Yes, occasionally someone's going to disappoint you. You can navigate it at that point in time. For the gross majority of good people that you've brought onto your team and that you have in your organization, they're going to appreciate and give back this trust in dividends many, many times over. So practice swift trust. One of my favorite power tools to navigate this trust issue is start creating more heroes. Nothing builds trust faster than your ability to take people, challenge people, support people, help them knock down barriers, and when they're successful, individuals or groups, to make heroes out of them. Instead of putting yourself in the middle of the spotlight, which frankly a fair number of those lousy leaders that I mentioned earlier are experts at doing, shine the spotlight brightly on everyone else. Create more heroes in the workplace. I want you to internalize. This was advice that I received earlier in my career. You will go as far as you are able to communicate. Communication is at the root of everything. I've got some more content on that here. You will go as far in your career as you are able to communicate, but you have to work deliberately on this skill set. You have to cultivate it. You have to develop it. You have to learn to tackle the challenging conversations. You have to learn to manage your mind and your body. 100% of the time, when there's a problem in the workplace, I guarantee you there's a communication issue lurking behind the scenes somewhere. And accountability. Did I mention that earlier in the context of values? Maybe the single most powerful component of an effective working environment to promote high performance. But accountability is not only your accountability, it's treating everybody fairly. You can't have two sets of rules, one set of rules for the superstar, another set of rules for everyone else. You can't have those individuals who somehow manage to skirt being accountable for their obligations. It has to be fair and free and universally practiced, including with yourself. It's rocket fuel for high performance. We talk a lot about our teams. Guess what? Newsflash. You don't have a team unless this grouping of individuals has a clear and compelling purpose to work together. You may have a department, you might have a work group, but you don't have a team unless there's a clear and compelling purpose. I can tell you, however, that if you're able to achieve that clear and compelling purpose, what you can accomplish is nearly unlimited. So give your group purpose and turn it into a team. The most important conversations in the workplace the most important conversations in your career and maybe even in your personal life, these are the ones you don't want to have. It's that uncomfortable feedback discussion. It's that performance evaluation you've been putting off. Whatever it happens to be, it's the difficult discussion with an equally difficult boss. You have to make those top priority. 100% of managers that I know, and I ask this question in workshops after I've had a chance to get to know people a little bit and they've kind of let down their guard. It's like, all right, just, everybody kind of fess up here. How many of you will admit to putting off a tough discussion? Everybody raises their hands. It's 100% over and over again. So this includes you. I want you right now to think about how you're going to schedule, when you're going to schedule that discussion, and after this webinar, actually do it. If you have to master one thing, master challenging conversations. Remember how critical communications are, and communications issues are at the root of all of our challenges. Well, it's those most difficult conversations where we promote growth, learning, and performance. So if I'm not hitting this communication issue from enough angles, let me know. But the difficult discussions are the ones where we mine the gold. In order to master those challenging conversations, you're going to have to learn to manage the component of fear. One of the reasons so many of us put off these awkward, disconcerting, and even disturbing feeling discussions is because we're concerned about the reaction. We might be concerned someone won't like us. We might be concerned that they're going to react negatively, adversely, or in an excited manner. So you need to cultivate a strategy to prevent what the neuroscientists call amygdala hijack. That's a fancy phrase for saying that your brain kicks into gear and floods your system with chemicals, and oh my gosh, we lose control of our, logic and central processing capabilities. And I love this resource. I'm highlighting this here because I came across it recently, Talking to Crazy by Dr. Mark Goldston. What an incredible resource, maybe the best find that I have had in the last few years. Beginning today, beginning immediately following this event, I would like to request, and frankly, I'd rather insist, that you stop sandwiching your constructive feedback. And if you don't know what that term means, it's the butt sandwich. Hey, you're doing a great job, Mary, but I really need to talk to you about this one issue. But you're doing a great job. And of course, we don't say it in quite that sequence of events, but we start the conversation with praise. We sandwich right in the middle, really the meat of the behavior that we want someone to work on, and then we finish it off by putting the bottom piece of bread on this butt sandwich and asking people to do something. So guess what? It confuses the message. People push back at me. They say, Art, I want to give positive feedback. And you know what? I want you to. I want you to give positive feedback, well-deserved positive feedback that's behavioral and business-focused in a 3-to-1 ratio to constructive feedback. Just don't do it in the same conversations. There's literally nothing to gain. It is a crutch for you as the giver. It doesn't benefit the receiver. You should be all about benefiting the receiver, the other party in these conversations, especially when you're sitting down talking with them about something that merits a feedback discussion. And remember, what's the point of feedback? It's to strengthen those positive behaviors that contributed to high performance and eliminate those or change those negative behaviors that detract from high performance. Give a lot of positive feedback. In fact, use your leadership journal that I mentioned earlier to keep a tally mark of how many times you're delivering positive feedback to how many times you're delivering this constructive or the negative or tough type, whatever term you want to use. My hunch is if you start doing this for the next week, you'll be close to a 1-to-1 ratio, positive to constructive. Most of you will be negative, or you'll be a fractional ratio at that point. So I need you to increase that. Just don't do it in the same conversations, folks. It doesn't benefit anybody but yourself. The strongest coaching work is about time traveling, and yeah, feedback is looking back in time. I want you to start looking forward. Marshall Goldsmith came up with the brilliant labeling feed forward. Gosh, do I love that. What we're talking about in feed forward in coaching discussions is what this behavior will look like in the future. instead of preoccupying over something that happened in the past where likely we have imperfect and differing viewpoints on, you're focusing on what behaviors should look like moving forth. It's so much more positive. It's so much more effective. I'll even use the term, it's so much more constructive. So use feed forward in your coaching activities, not just feed back. I start every single workday reminding myself of this fabulous ancient phrase. We don't know who to attribute it to. There are a lot of different sources, but it's not really clear. I give thanks for whomever came up with this phrase. Be kind, for everyone I meet is waging a great battle. Think about that. Everyone you encounter has something significant going on in their lives. Likely it's something that you have no idea of. Whether they're navigating an illness, the illness of a loved one, dealing with marital strife, challenges with children, challenges with finances, whatever it happens to be, and practice and increase the amount of empathy you bring to your interchanges every single day. Along those lines, from a daily success habit, I love this technique. I'd like to take a few minutes every single morning. I use my leadership journal for this. And I jot down the answer to, what do I have to do to make this day a success? And then I do it. And guess what? At the end of the day, I look back. Most of us might preoccupy on what it was that we didn't do or what went wrong. I simply look at all of those things that went right and vow to do more of them tomorrow. And then I start it over the next day by jotting down my thoughts, my answers to, what do I have to do to make this day a success? What an incredible daily routine for everyone in a leadership role, frankly, for every professional. Along those same lines, I have a philosophy that you build success one encounter at a time. So if you want to make an improvement, if you want to make an immediate improvement after this webinar, operate with the mindset, with the mentality that you need to leave every encounter, every meeting, every interchange in a better shape than you found it when you got there. Create the presence of mind to do this, and your days will go well, your performance will improve, everybody will notice it. What an incredible way to manage yourself. And remember, I highlighted the need for you to manage your team, manage your network, but most of all, manage yourself. The most powerful development question you may have in your library of questions is when somebody walks up to you and says, hey, we've got this situation here, what should I do? Is for you to pause, think deeply, contemplate, look at them and very honestly say, I don't know. What do you think you should do? You may have to repeat this 2 or 3 times. With some people, I've had to do it 15 times. At the end of the day, eventually everyone will get they'll get the message. Look, they have to at least think through the issue. You're there to collaborate. You're there to help. But you don't need to provide all the answers. And in fact, you want to not create a scenario where people are dependent upon you for the answers. So I don't know. What do you think you should do is a surprisingly powerful, albeit a simple statement. Use it in great health. Hey, I told you there was going to be a little bonus here. So you want to get these slides because it's hard to write down this explosion of leadership ideas all at one time. I'm happy to provide them. Just drop me a note. I am a big believer in having just an appropriate correspondence. I want to thank you for attending the webinar. I'm going to send along the slides. I also have a set of coaching questions that I regularly refresh. I'm happy to share those with you if you'd like them, so include that in the note. All right, commercial over. Back to your regularly scheduled content. I think it's important for all of us to accept, one, we're never going to achieve perfection, and from time to time, we're going to trip all over ourselves. And one of the interesting perspectives, and people look at me a little funny when I say this, is guess what? That moment in time when you make a mistake is one of the best teaching tools you have as a leader. Recognize the mistake. Don't hide from it. Publicize it as needed. I know that sounds counterintuitive and scary. Apologize for it. Highlight to people what you learned in the process and how you'll approach that situation in the future, and move forward. Guess what? You've probably hit upon 20 of my concepts here in this, not the least of which is that issue of accountability. It's literally rocket fuel for strengthening accountability in the workplace. And guess what? We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. Yourself, myself, we're not perfect. So deal with it, navigate it, apologize for it, highlight the lessons learned, and move forward. I want to offer a perspective. We spend too much time with the wrong people. I should be spending time with those people that are striving to grow and to change and to transform and to stretch. And instead, many managers I encounter spend way too much time with individuals that, frankly, need to be voted off the bus or are an awful lot of work and just not appropriate. So don't spend too much time with the wrong people in your life. And from the same token, I long ago developed the perspective to hire slow and fire fast. And I know that sounds harsh, well, at least half of it. You should always hire slow and look, through behavioral interviewing and assessing as best as you can character and fit and understanding values. But when someone has skirted the values, when somebody stomps on the values, when somebody, in spite of being given ample opportunity, due process, and fairness, doesn't respond, you need to find a way for the benefit not only of your own sanity, but for your team, your team's performance, for that issue of accountability in the environment, which I think drives performance, and for the benefit of your firm. So hire slow, fire fast, do it with fairness, follow your firm's processes, but don't belabor it. Remember, that may very well be one of those challenging conversations that you need to have that creates an incredibly positive outcome for your organization. My recommendation is to quit looking for talent in the same old places. My single best hire ever came from a non-traditional environment. I was a vice president in a software company. I hired an individual who was a manager in an Eddie Bauer retail store, and he was hired because he was remarkable with customers and clients, and we needed somebody who had the skill sets and the drive to solve problems, and brought him on board. And I have to laugh because even during the interview process, he called me by the musician's name, Tom Petty, not Art Petty. He did it once, he did it twice, he did it 3 times. I didn't say anything. I did bring it up in the second, and he navigated that brilliantly. He's now a senior director inside one of the world's largest business software companies. So what an incredible example. I've hired people out of AT&T telephone stores. Sorry, AT&T, I took some good talent from you. An individual in there who was a manager who was literally dealing with, not a manager, he was an employee. The manager was fairly incompetent from my viewing. The clients in there were not happy. The tension was strong, and this individual, this employee, went from person to person and group to group and took away the tension, solved the problems, and helped everybody leave that store satisfied with the situation. I gave him my card, said if he was ever looking, please reach out to me. He did. I hired him. He's had an incredible career. So look for that talent in the unusual places. It's usually not found via human resources. It's usually not found through your talent recruiters. You need to be scouting talent everywhere you go. When I hire, I look most for character and grit. And I tell a long story, which I'll make really short in this session here, where I'm evaluating 2 people for an important position. One has this just unbelievable pedigree, an individual that appears to have born under the lucky signs or whatever appropriately lucky little metaphor you want to provide here, but has a remarkable pedigree and a solid track record. The other one doesn't have quite the same pedigree, didn't have the top Ivy League college, had some failures along the way with successes, had some personal tragedy that drove some more failure. I talked with both of them at length. A was a great candidate, there's no doubt about it. But B, what she had navigated, what she had survived, and what she had learned from was staggering. I hired B because I hire for character and grit. So many managers I encounter preoccupy on the failures. As I mentioned earlier, it's not always going to go well. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to navigate and have to deal with difficult people. There will be points in time when you hate your job, but really, if you aspire to lead, if you go back to why you're doing what you're doing, you know deep down you love this work and that the cause is bigger than the moment. Just don't let those failures define you. I caught a great and talented manager on the brink of her deciding to retire 10 years earlier. We navigated the situation together. She was so down from dealing with a difficult employee. We got through it. 1 year later, she was reborn within her career. You couldn't believe the excitement and the energy and the focus. So don't let those failures define you. Flail forward if you have to and keep improving. And along those same lines, please, when the moments that are the hardest, and it's impossible for us to think like this when we're in the middle of them, no one in the middle of the crisis says, gosh, I'm going to come out of this really smart and really wise, and I'll put it to great use someday. You'd like to think that you would think that, but you don't. But I'd at least like you to know that those things that you've been through and those things that you will go through, it's where your character as a leader is forged. So embrace the crucible moments and flail forward. I love big thinkers. We need a lot of big thinkers in our workplace. But guess what? I like big thinkers who are big doers as well. I, in fact, like to promote those individuals. Be a doer because we're accountable for results. One of the ways you can drive results is to build coalitions for fun and profit. Grow your influence in an organization. It's one of the single biggest power tools for growing influence is by bringing disparate groups together and individuals from groups across an organization to solve critical problems. What a powerful way to grow influence. Along those same lines, and I know I say that a lot, these tie together in many ways. Find and solve problems in the gray zone to strengthen your influence. And what the gray zone is, we all know it. Think about that issue. There's a big problem somewhere. It exists. A bunch of you know it. People across functions know it. But no one's really accountable for fixing it. Well, look at the mirror or raise your hand right now. I want to see a show of hands. Volunteer to go out and pull people together, build that coalition, solve those problems, and create some heroes out of the people who solve them and watch your influence skyrocket. What an incredible way, and I'm going to use the P word, to gain power in your organization. Influence and power to me are relatively similar. Power tends to have that little bit of a negative connotation. So grow your influence. Solve those problems in the gray zone. I work with businesses all of the time on strategy. I work with individuals that are supposed to be forward-thinking, product managers, marketing types, looking out at where their organizations and industries are heading. And guess what? So many of them have blinders on, and they're looking exclusively at their industry. They're spending big budgets attending industry events, talking with people within the industry, looking and studying at competitors. Chances are the big disruptive event, the trigger event, or the opportunity is 3 marketplaces away in this world today, and you're about to get blindsided or you'll miss an opportunity. So I use the phrase that, hey, look, you're not going to see the future properly if you stare out the same conference room window all of the time. While the seasons may change, the view fundamentally never does. Learn to change the view regularly. Back to accountability. The do must match the tell. I love that phrase. I wish I had thought of it. It was actually given to me in an interview when I was talking to people about what creates accountability. How do you evaluate a leader and determine if he or she is worthy of your trust? And one individual jumped up and said, the do has to match the tell. So words and actions have to match. Remind yourself, everyone's watching and they are judging. And credibility is incredibly important. Build your credibility by making certain that the do matches the tell. Not only shouldn't you be the smartest person in the room, but I don't want you to try to be the smartest person in the room. Too many managers and those in leadership roles think they need to have the answer to everything. Guess what? Your job is to find people who have great answers who can find those answers out there. If you're the smartest person in the room, something's really wrong with your hiring habits. And if you're trying to pretend that you're the smartest person in the room, you don't really have that leadership role right. You need to go all of the way back to the beginning of this. Ask what it is you're trying to achieve while you lead. What type of leader do you want to be? And you have to ask and answer Angela's question at the end of the time working with these people. What will they say that I did? Questions. Questions are the most powerful tools you have in your arsenal for teaching others how to succeed. Learn to use and apply questions. Use questions in a ratio that exceeds that of the number of statements that you dispense. Ask questions. The 2 best indicators of your effectiveness as a leader are, results count. Your team's performance, no doubt about it. How well are they performing? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's your performance in supporting their development? How many people are you able to help support develop into emerging leaders? How many individuals are you able to push out into other parts of the organization to take on important new roles and contribute to the growth of the business? How effective are you at building this leadership pipeline? So I love this. The team's performance goes without saying. Your performance in supporting their development, I think that's an incredible indicator of your effectiveness. So why don't you step back and take a look and assess, and then do what it takes to strengthen in this area. I absolutely love this one. Is it allowed to love my own content? I'm just, in case you can't tell, I'm so incredibly passionate about these behaviors. Grab a hold and seize some of these behaviors and put them to work, and I guarantee results will grow and success will come your way. The best leaders I know don't assume that their teams actually understand how to talk to each other. So often our discussions, and just observe the next group session that you attend, are kind of this agglomeration of facts and opinions and issues with undertones of politics and biases. And oh my gosh, if there are people with authority or a boss in the room, it's really biased. You need to find ways to draw the best out of everybody and to smooth those conversations out. Although it's not on screen, my single favorite reference for teaching teams how to talk is Six Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono. I use that technique all of the time. Buy the book, spend the $12, spend a couple of hours reading it, and then start practicing the technique in your workplace. It's really easy, it's simple, but by no means simplistic. It truly does help you focus the power of everybody and straighten out those conversations and realize the potential from them. And by the same token, don't assume that groups know how to decide anything. It's hard enough for us as individuals with all of the inherent biases that we bring to a situation. Well, that's exponentially more complicated when you have a group involved. So learn the power of framing issues. Learn how to identify the biases and do everything you can to strike them out. Get that talking component right. Ask the most powerful question on the decision, which is, hey, how are we going to make this decision? How many times have you actually ever heard that question asked in a meeting? Start asking that yourself going forward. The 3 secrets to creating what is the most important output of your work as a leader, which is an effective working environment. Strike out fear, and strike out fear. Any questions? You know what? Results still count. Here's where it can go horribly wrong. And the drive for results, too many of us, too many in the past, too many I've encountered, have made some less than effective choices on how they were going to get those results. So yeah, you get the license to continue to lead if you're driving the right results for your organization, but I want you to make the careful choices. As it comes to ethical dilemmas, as soon as you rationalize one step across the gray line, it becomes easier and easier over time to do it again. Don't go there. So make careful choices about how you create results. Please know that the people around you are going to do their absolute best work only if they understand how their individual assignments and how their activities, their efforts, their energies, the products of their physical labor and mental labors, how they connect to the big picture. Create context for everybody around you and you'll get people to do their best work. And here's the question I want you to jot down right now and go back and start asking your team this. Start once a month. You're not going to get very good answers up front. Keep asking it every single month. How am I doing? How am I doing? And finally, when someone or a few someones have the courage to tell you how you're really doing, do something about it. Strengthen. And you know what? People will begin to take you seriously. Ask your team, how am I doing? And then do it. Something that we all have to learn. We have to learn the language of strategy. We have to learn the tools of strategy. It's about how we create value. It's about how we compete successfully in this world. It's about how we help our organizations level up in the face of change. I want you to study, learn the language of tools and the thinking processes of great strategists, because you know what? Great strategists, there may be the occasional person, but even those people, Gates and Jobs and others that we view as incredible strategists in their time, they didn't start out that way. It was after they gained experience over time. So great strategists are more built than made. Learn the language, tools, and thinking of great strategists. Along those lines, curiosity is an incredible attribute of the best leaders I know and the best strategists I know. And it goes back to that point of asking questions. And when you're involved in strategy, avoid the temptation to become that Me Too type company, to emulate your competitors, because everybody's running around, everybody in sales is running around worried about what the competitor just announced. You need to identify opportunities to serve audiences in brilliant and unexpected ways. There's a term for that. It's called Miushu. The brilliant and unexpected. That's when you know that you're beginning to emerge as a strategist. Here's my wake-up call for everybody out there listening. In our careers, someone has to choose us to succeed. If you internalize this concept, a lot of what you have to do becomes really easy to digest and really easy to understand. It doesn't matter how much hard work you do. If somebody doesn't have the trust in you to make good decisions about people and resources, money, strategic choices, they're not going to choose you to succeed. Someone or some group has to tap you and say, I want you to take this on. I want you to have more responsibility because I trust you. Your career is a continuous exercise in leveling up. The gamers have it right. If we stop learning, even for a second in this world, we'll perish. And given the rate of change and the fascinating world that we're all living in of technological advancements and industry disruption and globalization and urbanization and shifting demographics and so forth and so on, it's a constant relearning process. So never, ever, ever quit learning. You don't want to do that even for a second. Continually level up. As I'm winding down here, a little bit more profound thinking. This role of leader, it's absolutely the role of a lifetime. It's an honor to serve and support. If you do half or 1/3 of the things that I talk about in this fast-moving, drinking from the fire hose of leadership ideas, you'll be successful and you'll be able to look back and marvel at what you accomplished. But know this, you're never going to achieve perfection, and you're never done learning. On the day you retire, you're still an apprentice when it comes to the role of a leader. The best advice I ever received, and I live by it daily, is that the joy is always in the journey, never the destination. Someday you're going to wake up, and perhaps the leadership phase of your career is over. And you know what? You won't necessarily think of the accomplishments. You'll think about how much you miss the daily journey and the work of supporting and developing great people. I want you to enjoy your journey, the best of health, happiness, and success along the way. Use these ideas and great health, and I would love to hear from you. So if you're going to reach out and you want the slides, if you want the coaching questions, if you want to say, hey, Art, have you thought about this idea? Visit me on the Management Excellence blog. You see the URL up there. You can Google my name or search on my name at artpetty.com. There's my email address. I am honored to help you along the way. Best of success, health, and happiness to all of you. Thanks for being here.